All right. We're going to do our 2025 Formula One season preview. Do you want to start out just do the picks for who do you think are going to win the constructors and who do you think are going to win the World Drivers' Championship, and then we'll just get into like actually like the storylines of the season because I think it's gonna be a really interesting season. Um, here let's start this with the World Constructors Champions picks. Do you want to
Sure.
do you want to go first?
I'll go first. I think it's hard to distance from last season, given like everything we're hearing this season, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, after, but like how so many of the cars are similar to last year. So
Yeah.
like not Red Bull. I do think McLaren could still be good, and I have a feeling Ferrari is going to be really good. So I'd say McLaren and Ferrari are like my top two for constructor.
If you were to like put like what 1 through 10, who are you putting down?
So I think I put McLaren number one, Ferrari
Okay.
number two.
Okay.
Number three, I think will be interesting. Like it could be Red Bull or Mercedes. I don't. It's hard. Like I don't think Mercedes is going to do that much better. I think if they did, they would have done it before.
Yeah.
I think Red Bull, um, their car is the one that people are literally saying is the least different than last year. So I'm not sure between those two. I'd say my like kind of dark horse pick, like who could be number three, is maybe Aston Martin with Adrian Newey now. So like I
Okay.
think like any three of those could be in number three.
So we're
Um,
doing Aston Martin three. We're gonna make
yeah,
you be dangerous, and
that'll be
then
dangerous. Fine.
number
Then I put
four
Red
is
Bull and Mercedes.
Red Bull, Mercedes. All right, let's get a little less sexy. Who do you think is getting the best of the rest?
Um,
Well, it's
I
just
think
but by the way, the
Alpine.
best of the rest used to be four, but now I think it's six. You know what I mean? Like it used to be
Interesting.
like because best of the rest like used to be defined as like the person who's not in the top three, but now
Yeah.
you just have this like solid top five that I feel like the best of the rest is really 6 through 10.
Yep.
But yeah, who do you
Agree
think
with
is
that.
six?
So six, I think, could either be Williams. I like Williams. I think they have the two best drivers they've had in a long time. So I think they can do something with the car. Or maybe Alpine. I'm hearing things that people like Alpine's car for this year.
Yeah.
Um, Possibly Red Bull second team in there. Like, don't really know. Let me go. We'll go spicy. We'll go Williams and then Alpine seventh.
Okay. Williams, Alpine, eighth. We have eighth, ninth, and tenth. You have
We'll do
Haas,
eighth. We'll do whatever they want to call the Red Bull second team this year.
Red Bull
Like
two. Yeah, we're just
Visa,
gonna call
Cash
it that.
Card, Venmo,
Yeah.
whatever it's called.
JP
Um,
Morgan, Zelle.
Nine, I'm gonna go Haas, and then 10th, I'm gonna go um, Sauber, Alfa Romeo, Kickstart, whatever the hell it's called.
Yeah, I don't think my list is too different than yours, but what I have is I have number one Ferrari. I need to
Yeah.
obviously talk
Okay.
about this. And then I have number two McLaren. Number three, I have who did I put down? Oh yeah, I have Red Bull number three,
Mhm.
Mercedes number four. Sorry, I have Aston Martin number four,
Okay.
Mercedes number five. Number six, I have Haas,
Okay. Yeah.
Williams,
Yeah.
um, Alpine. No, let's do Sauber eight, Alpine, and then RB
Interesting.
two.
Sauber 8. That's the weirdest one to me on that whole list.
Okay, so I think number one and two. So I was talking about this in one of my F1 group chats, and we're going back and forth about like is it Ferrari number one, Ferrari number two, and I was like, okay, let's take this away and just give me the possibilities for each of them. And I was like, I think it's Ferrari 50%, McLaren 45%, and Red Bull, Aston Martin, Mercedes is the other 5%, right? And I think everybody agrees that that's the general breakdown. It's just a question of is Ferrari 50% or is it McLaren 50%? You know what I mean? Like I think we're all kind of on the same page. It's just like who do you give that slight edge to?
Yeah.
I think Lando has like a nervous breakdown this year. I think that we find him. before like the Belgian Grand Prix, like, with like a fifth of vodka in like a shower with like a revolver and like,
Lando's Haters Club is coming back. Okay, all right.
yeah, I think that like being mentally dominated by Max is one thing, but then being mentally dominated by Oscar Piastri is another thing. Now, there is a counter argument. I mean, I don't want to get too much into the drivers right now, but like there's a counter argument that I think that Lando's place is kind of like as a Charles Barkley of Formula One. Like he's not supposed to be like, actually like going for the championship. He's just a guy who just wants to enjoy racing. You know what I mean? And I don't think he really wants to do all these head games that like you have to do to be the best. So that's kind of why I think that McLaren doesn't win because I think Ferrari like I just think that Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc get those extra couple of points when it matters. And then also we saw last year that like like everyone makes fun of Ferrari for very good reason, right? They have had the craziest tactical decision making for the past decade. That being said, last year McLaren was kind of the Ferrari. You know what I mean? And they basically backed into the title because like Ferrari just didn't have a good number two, I think, as much as I
Yeah.
love Carlos Sainz. Ferrari have that this year. And I mean, the best argument against Ferrari, in my opinion, is that there's so much tension between Lewis and Leclerc that that kind of blows up. I mean, we saw that blow up with like Leclerc and Vettel before. Um, for Aston Martin, I very much agree with you. Like, I think that Aston Martin gets a big jump this year. I don't think it's third, but I think that Adrian Newey like comes in and just kind of like changes a lot of stuff and makes things a lot better. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it'll be third, but like, I think, yeah, there'll be a big step up there. Totally agree.
I think that again, this is like the driver stuff, but I think that Liam Lawson ends up losing his seat to Yuki. Um, and so I think that
Okay.
Yuki's actually going to give Red Bull a whole lot of points at the end of the year. And I think we're going to see like a storyline between them. But let's go to the bottom of the grid because I feel like all of these storylines we're talking about is just like world, drivers championship
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So you said you're shocked by Haas or Sauber. What was the one you're
Sauber.
shocked about?
Because
Yeah,
Sauber, they're the worst team last year. If you
yeah.
look at stuff, they're basically, it looks like they're punting this year. Like they're not doing anything with the car. Like to me, I'm like, how can I think the car that was worse last year is going to be any better this year when like they're doing minimal work on the car? They're not the only team, right? Like Haas is the same way. Haas is not doing much with their car this year either. So like I think they should be at the bottom. But like Sauber to me, I'm just like they were so bad last year, and they're just waiting like until like the new rules and regulations. Like I don't think they do anything this year whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean I think like that's a really good argument, and I'm to be honest, I wish you had told me that before. I made these picks. No, I'm just kidding. I'm see, I was aware of that, but like, for me, like Sauber, like I when it comes to like um, you know, the top of the standings, I think that the drivers don't really matter as much as we think they do. But I think that when it
Sure.
comes to the bottom of the standards, I think the drivers actually matter like a whole lot because they're able to get you that extra 4 points, that extra 6 points. And I was really impressed by Nico Hulkenberg last year, to be honest. That's really what it is. And I know that like people could come back and he'd be like, oh, but like they had Valtteri Bottas. But like, I don't know, like do we have any reason to be impressed by Valtteri Bottas as like a driver? He got
I mean, I
outscored by
think
Zhou.
Bottas, it's hard to say, right? Like he hasn't like again, the car was the worst car last year, right?
Yeah,
I have the opinion of him that he's like a decent driver, but like that hasn't been tested in a while. Okay. So if you believe he's a decent driver, do you think Hulkenberg is a decent driver or worse?
I
At
think
best,
Hulk.
he's as good as him and probably a little bit worse.
I think Hulkenberg is better than him.
Really? Hmm.
I
Okay.
I, I think if you put Val so here I guess here's another way to think about it. I think that on a good team, Valtteri Bottas is better. I think on a bad team, Nico Hulkenberg is better.
Well, Hulkenberg's gone through a lot more. He's never won a race, right? Like he
Yeah.
has this long career and has had like no success. So like if you take it from that vantage point, like yeah, he can slog through it probably better versus Bottas, who's used to always being number one or number two for so many years. Like
Yeah.
I can see that
I
mindset. Yeah.
I mean, he also, he's never had a podium, but
Yeah.
like he's also not been on a lot of great teams. Like he has not had like the best luck as a driver. Valtteri Bottas literally got like the second Mercedes seat. You know what I mean? Like, and I know that that comes with a whole lot of pressure, as we saw with like Checo Perez. But like, I also think that Lewis Hamilton like went out of his way to protect Valtteri as a teammate
Yeah.
because of the fact that he had that terrible experience with Nico, right? So he was
Yeah.
just like,
Oh
oh, this
yeah.
guy wants to be second fiddle. But by the way, I think we've talked about this before, but like the fact that Valtteri Bottas literally had like two entire episodes of Drive to Survive about how pissed he was that he wasn't the first driver, and then he literally admitted on camera to sabotaging Lewis Hamilton during a championship fight. It's like, bro, like, are you retarded? Like, why would you do that? Um, yeah, so I also believe in Williams. I believe in Williams a little bit less than I really think that Haas is turning stuff around. I mean, last year at the beginning of the year, I was high on Haas, and I turned out to be right about that. One of the
No,
few
you
things
were.
in my
You were
life
right
I've
about
been
it.
right about, like literally ever. But
What was interesting, I was watching some of like I don't know, the talk and the highlights about the first day of testing today. And they're saying how the Haas, which is basically the Ferrari car for everything it can be, and then everything else they built, like
yeah,
to like legally what they're allowed to by the governing body. But the Haas is still running parts of the 2024 Ferrari versus the 2025, which is another reason. Like the car is not changing a whole lot versus some of the other teams. So
yeah,
like the Ferrari changed from a push rod to a pull rod suspension in the front. I believe that's the way they went. The Haas is still running the old one. Now, there's no
yeah.
like inherent necessarily like difference like between the two. It's like down to aerodynamics, like blah blah blah, whatever. But to me, it just means like they're just sticking with the old car. Like they're not doing a lot to really win this year. So, I could be wrong, but
I
that's
I
not a good
I
sign.
I think so. I think the problem with Haas as a general like competitor is that they don't have the manpower and the factory power to really build a car.
No,
Like
they don't. Not at all.
they've never built a car from scratch as a team. So the question with Haas is like, A, when are they going to actually do that? But then B, like, what is the extent to which they can cobble together a car and have it be raceable? Last year showed that they were able to make good improvements to the car. I mean, like, if you look at the Haas point drop off, like every year before, it's been like an incredibly aggressive, except for
Yeah.
the years where they literally scored 0 points, and obviously there's no drop off. But
They went
like
negative. Yeah.
last year, they didn't really have that big of a drop off. I don't think. Yeah, I'm going to pull up the standings from last year. Well, one thing that also makes this difficult, but this is Brazilian ESPN, is that Haas, uh, like there's so many new drivers on the grid that it makes it difficult to like, really calibrate based on drivers because it's
What is it? There's
like
like four new ones this year, I think.
yeah, there is Jack Doohan, Ali
Behrman.
Bierman, Gabriel Bortoleto,
Yep.
Kimi Antonetti, Isaac Hajar,
Oh, there's
and
five.
yeah. Um, Here, let's look at Haas last year. So 58 points, but like 4, 4, 4, 8, 7.
They scored
Like,
more consistently at the end of the season. Yeah.
yeah, this is a good year in my opinion. And then if you look at Pilotos, which is Brazilian for drivers, um, Nico Hulkenberg at 11th, and he got absolutely no help from Magnussen. If
No,
you
no.
look at
They
this,
used to not
like
get along. Like I'm sure like they've said things are not so bad now, but they did not used to get along at all. So at best, they're just like amicable now.
I actually like so I've been fascinated by their partnership this year or last year, and they actually really became good friends.
Really?
It's like a weird so basically they were just both like this is the end of both of our careers. We're on the same team. Let's like actually become friends. And then they did. Like
Huh.
they actually really enjoyed it. And there were a couple of races where there was one race in particular, I forgot which one it was, where like Magnussen basically just destroyed his. He could have finished in ninth place, but he
Hmm.
completely destroyed his own race, and he finished in like 14th in order to get Nico Hulkenberg up to like seventh. So basically, there was like this like DRS train. And
Yeah.
instead of pitting earlier so that he could be competitive, he basically just held up the DRS train. And the announcers, I was watching the F1 TV coverage. There's like Nico Hulkenberg needs 10 extra seconds. There's no way that Kevin Magnussen's going to hold this train up for 10 seconds, like in order to get 10 extra seconds. And he did. He literally like got a 10-second gap, and his race completely fucked because of it. But Nico Hulkenberg ended up winning, and he looked like legitimately happy for it. But last year was the year of reconciliation because we also have Ocon and Gasly who became good friends.
Yeah.
So
Ocon's the one who's not finding any friends anywhere on the grid. Yeah.
by the way, did you know that Atlassian is now the sponsor for Williams?
Really? No, I didn't know that.
Esteban Ocon at Haas. I think that's gonna be an interesting dynamic. I really hope there's gonna be a lot of rain next year so that Haas can pick up points. Esteban
Only
Ocon
one.
can only drive in the rain.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's look at our World Drivers' Championship
All
picks.
right, you go first this time because I'm not quite as certain of my picks on this, but
Okay. Um, Here I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I wrote it down before. Let's start out just with the top 10, just because I think that that's like the
sure.
most interesting. So I have Max, Leclerc, Oscar, Lewis, Lando, Alonso, George, and then Yuki,
Yuki, oh my God.
Kimi, and then Lance. That's my top 10. And I mean, like Lance, literally the reason why I have Lance at number 10 is because in order for Aston Martin to finish fourth, they Lance needs to score some points. So
Yeah.
yeah. Do you want to do yours first, or do you want to just comment on this first?
I'll do mine. I mean, I'm kind of coming up with these on the fly. I didn't write them down, but for number one, I don't know. I think it's Lando. I think it's Lando.
Okay. This would be the great debate of
This
this
will be the big debate.
podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna say number two, Leclerc, three, Oscar, and probably four, Lewis. Yeah. Yeah, because I think the Red Bull doesn't do nearly as well this year. Say five max. After that, hmm. Well, Yuki's not going to be anywhere in my top 10, so I know that one's not there. Um, I like Alonso at six. I would go Alonso six. Yep, and George seventh. Who'd go eight?
You need to have
Probably.
Lance above Kimmy. Well, I guess you don't. I guess if Alonso's above
Yeah, I
George,
would
if
put
the
Kimmy here, and then I want to put like gasoline here somewhere, maybe at 10. Who do I want at nine?
Liam Lawson.
Yeah, I could put Lawson at nine and Gasly at 10. That
Okay.
seems right to me. Yeah.
Um. So I mean, the conversation that everyone wants us to have is obviously about Yuki.
Yeah.
No, we can start with Lando. Is your case for Lando just that the McLaren is just going to be the better car?
I think well, there's two things here. Like, it depends upon why you think McLaren did better last year, right? Like, was it just the flexi wings? Is that going to like disappear this year, that advantage? I think maybe that's part of it, maybe not all. But I think the Red Bull falls off more and McLaren like continues to dominate a bit like it did in the end of last season. So I think Lando or Oscar would be at the top. I do think Lando's a good race car driver. I do agree that like he is not like a stone cold killer, like you've pointed out many times, and I agree. But like that doesn't mean he can't win. So yeah, I think he wins. I think it would be close. Like if the Ferrari does well this year, it totally could be Leclerc. Because I do think Hamilton is not as good as he used to be. That's just like personal opinion.
Yeah.
Like he would have been better in the Mercedes, like over George, I think. Like,
I think until the last race, he was trailing. No. He ended up below George last year.
yeah. So like, I mean,
So
people are gonna say like, oh, he wasn't trying as hard because he was going to Ferrari and everything. Like, I just don't believe he's as good now as he used to be. And I don't think
yeah,
there's any knock at him. He's amazing talent. Like he's done amazing in the sport, like best driver possibly ever. But like I just don't think he's as good anymore. So like I think Leclerc does a little bit better than him. So that's like the top four right there, right? Like I think Lando's gonna do a bit better than Oscar and Leclerc better than Hamilton. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that so I completely agree on Lewis. So one thing we are talking about before this started was that part of me kind of hopes that Red Bull just completely shit the bed. Because I would, I'm not a Lewis hater. I don't think like there are a lot of
no,
people
not
who
at
hate
all.
Lewis. I don't like, obviously 2021 season, like, tempers flared. And like I hate Lewis Hamilton fans because they're completely wrong about that judgment on the 2021 season. I made multiple videos about this, but we're not even gonna go there. But like I thought Lewis was very classy last year when it came to Max. So I don't hate him, but I do think that he's dropped off significantly, and I think Leclerc just like wipes the floor with him. When it comes to Max, so I agree. Like I think the Red Bull car is going to be like bad. I don't think it's going to be nearly as good as it was last year. But the thing about Max last year is that like so if you look at the like his car, right? So the drop off was in Italy, right? That's
Italy to Monaco, so May, yeah,
that's when the drop off happened, right?
yeah.
If you look at the points, and like a lot of people have totaled this, literally after Italy, the number one scorer of points was still Max Verstappen. Like people like Lando
Yeah.
fans and Lando has made this argument that Max's lead at the beginning of the season was insurmountable. That is not true. Like if you
Yeah.
take away all of the like the lead points, he's by the way, he also DNF'd in Australia. But if you take away all those points, he still wins the World Drivers' Championship. I just think that he is like a beast. I think he is like a lunatic. And I've watched so many videos in the past week that have been highlights from Sao Paulo set to Skyfall, the song, that I'm just completely in on Max this season. Um,
I mean,
and yeah,
I agree with you that like if this was a ranking of like who is the best driver overall on the grid, it's Max. Like he is the best driver. Like,
yeah,
but I do think the Red Bull like it doesn't do any better than last year, and I think other people made progress where the Red Bull isn't.
yeah.
Like,
So I think that so like if I could make a counter argument to that is that Adrian knew he left, right?
yep,
And like literally after he left, the car just fell apart, right?
literally the next race. Yeah,
But I think part of the reason why that happened was because the team was like nervous. It was like Newey's creation, and they were like, we can't, do stuff with this. You know what I mean? And now they have like a new team together that has like made this car, even if it's very similar, that's made this car, and they're gonna like feel comfortable tinkering and like making changes and stuff. Like the me putting Maximo in, I'm not going to argue that the Red Bulls be their one car. It's obviously not going to be. Me having Max there is just complete, just like faith in Max Verstappen to,
yep.
pull rabbits out the hat. I think that like what really helps him this year, that I think is like underappreciated by the media yet, but I think it becomes a big story in the year is that Lewis and Leclerc are going to take points off each other, right? And like Oscar and Lando are going to take points off each other.
That's true.
Nobody's
Yeah.
taking points off of Max. Like if Liam Lawson tries to take points out of Max, Christian Horner is going to send him so many dick pics that he's never he's going to go to sleep thinking about Christian Horner's dick, which is not something that any of us wants to do, right?
Just
So
literally they're popping up while he's driving, like, ah, God.
exactly. So that's another case for Max. Like literally like anybody who wants to make a counter argument to Max, like I see it, I agree with it. I just have such confidence in him as a driver that I think he pulls it out of the hat. There's only been two drivers in Formula One history that have
Mhm.
won multiple championships with cars that have not won the constructors championships. Max is one of two drivers who have done that.
Yeah.
The other driver, by the way, is the father of his girlfriend, which I think is kind of funny.
Oh, yeah, peak. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so that that's kind of my argument for Max. My argument for Lando is like Sao Paulo was such a bottle job, I think, that it just like any shred of respect that I had for Lando, which wasn't very much to begin with, like completely fell apart after Sao Paulo. Like he started second. Max
Mm.
started 17th and Max ended up winning the race. Like you can't keep that advantage. And then like, he was complaining, he was bitching, he was like, it was just luck. I mean, I think that that's like, obviously like a huge cop out, but
Yeah.
um one thing also that I think that really, just to like relitigate Sao Paulo is that Lando said afterwards, he was just like, they pulled me in and they shouldn't have. Like,
Yeah.
if you listen to the radio messages, George was telling his pit crew, leave me out. And Lando was telling his pit crew, pull me in. And I actually
Mm.
think that it was Lando telling his pit crew to pull him in. That's what got Mercedes to pull George in because George was livid. George was furious when they pulled it in. He was like, "What the
Yeah.
fuck?" Like he was cursing. He would have lost $5 million with the new FIA rules if it happened this year. He was just like, "What are you doing? This is crazy." And George is very rarely right, but when he is, he is right.
Yeah. No,
Um,
I mean, I hear you on that. Yeah, Sao Paulo wasn't good for him. Uh,
I think it's funny
I
that we have
can
a
see your
lot.
points. Like, and
Yeah,
there's totally a chance that like Lando doesn't do super well. Like, but I do think the McLaren will be up there. I do think they'll both be really high in the points.
if you
Similar to
look
last
at
year.
Lando and Oscar, let's just pick a red. Let's pick Spain,
Mhm.
right? 6 25, 15 12, 18 25, 10 18. Like these guys were pretty neck and neck, if not Oscar, like kind of having a little bit of an advantage. And I think that Oscar is his main competition this year. Like I think Oscar goes into the season saying, I'm number one. Mark
Yeah.
Webber obviously has told, McLaren that he has to be number one. Like it's in his contract apparently that they can't have a number one driver. Like they need to give equal preference. So I think he waves in their face this year because, Lando is the same driver that he was last year, right? Max is the same driver that he was last year, but Oscar has like improved just because he's, such a young driver, right?
I mean, yeah.
Although he's actually only a year younger than Lando, which I think is funny.
How old is Lando?
Lando's 26 and Oscar's 24, I think. So I think there's a 2 year
Okay.
difference. Um, What? So what? Why do you put Gasly in the top 10?
Gasly was pretty good towards the end of last season. I think in a bad Alpine, although the Alpine got better over the season. So
Yeah.
I think the Alpine car does a bit better in general this year. And so I don't know. I've always thought Gasly was a pretty decent driver. We could probably swap in there. Like I also think Williams is going to be pretty good this year. So like, could it be Carlos? Right? Like someone from there. I personally think Carlos is not quite as good as Leclerc, but not far off. Like I think they're closer together than what you think.
Yeah.
Um, so like I actually think Carlos is a pretty good driver. So like it could be him there too if the Williams is pretty decent. But I mean like look at Gasly at the end of last season. Like look at his points right there.
Yeah. I mean, so I actually have this like really bad quality where like if I believe in somebody and then they let me down, I like really go negative on them. Um and Neck learned this with Nottingham Forest earlier this year in the EPL. I was really high on Nottingham Forest, and then they lost like a few games in a row. And I was just like, fuck these guys. But then they ended up still being good. That's kind of me and Carlos Sainz. Like I went into the season last year, I made a video that was like Carlos Sainz is better than Leclerc, and then he just let me down. So, he's I'm does anyone know why Red Bull didn't sign him? Like that was really shocking to me that he
No,
didn't
no,
go to
I
Red
mean,
Bull.
I think without having like I don't know any inside info or like read into this a lot. From what I know, it sounds like they just waited so long with Perez that Carlos had
Oh,
to take something somewhere else, right?
yeah,
Like he was really waiting for Mercedes, but then Mercedes, from what I understand, had Kimi Antonelli from very early on, and they wouldn't like
yeah,
admit it, but they like kind of kept it open, but they really wanted him. So like he wanted Mercedes, didn't get that. Red Bull was with Perez way too long, right? So I think that's what happened. And then who else would have been left open? Like, not many other good options. So
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean that was really shocking for me. I mean the whole Paris saga was like perplexing because like there was no
I
reason for
really
him to keep
wonder
that
what went on
seat.
there because it's like, why did they wait so long to do
Yeah, I
something?
mean, I think it was a money decision. Like I think
Yeah.
his sponsors, I mean he is the money guy and he had a
But
huge
like
amount
it
of
makes no
bucks.
difference whether you did it in the middle or the end for that. It's just like you had to wait for it to get so bad to make the decision. It's like
I
you
think
capitulated at the bottom and sold before the stock goes up or something. Like,
so I think that they wanted him to race in Mexico.
yeah.
And Mexico was just like at the end of the season. So they were like, okay, let's just have it in Brazil and Las Vegas. Um,
Yeah.
which, I'm not for as a decision. Um, but yeah, I mean, my theory with Red Bull last year was I think that they like this is like one of um, you know, generally in life I'm not a conspiracy theorist. So like Formula One's my outlet for conspiracy theories. My conspiracy theory with Red Bull last year is that I think that Red Bull purposefully wanted to lose positions. Like I think they were very happy to end up third in the constructors so that Max could get that even bigger win on his resume. And because like if you think about Red Bull, like an extra 10-20 million dollars doesn't actually mean that much to them. But this year or last year, getting a lower spot means you get more wind tunnel time. And they were like, we want the more wind tunnel time in order to be able to develop our car for 2026. So I think they were more than happy to like give it to McLaren. They're like, as long as Max wins, like, you know, Max wins, Max looks better, and we get more wind tunnel time for 2026. So I don't think there was any like real urgency to get Paris out of there because it was like, the more spaces they lost, the better it was for them, weirdly enough.
Yeah. But then all this extra wind tunnel, I mean, I guess they can use the wind tunnel time to improve aerodynamics, which is something they can do even if they have not very, their car hasn't changed very much from last year, I guess. Then they can
Um,
also spend more money on 2026 car, I
well,
guess.
that's the thing though with with the cap, like they're gonna be up against the cap no matter what. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're gonna find the money. So the actual, winning bonus wasn't important to them, I don't think. Like I don't think they cared about that 10 to $20 million. They have a Thai billionaire backing them and they have Red Bull, you know what I mean? Like they have the cash, right? And this
Yeah.
isn't 2015 anymore, where like Mercedes could just spend everyone else into oblivion. Um, so I think they were just like, look, we need time to develop this 2026 car. We want the wind tunnel time, uh,
Yeah.
take it away. But about Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda, so do you think Liam Lawson's ending the year at Red Bull?
I mean, I think it's hard to say right now. Like, he looks pretty decent. He didn't beat Yuki out. I think he did better in some scenarios and Yuki did better in others.
Yeah.
Like, can he ramp up a lot in like half a season? It's possible. Um, but yeah, it's gonna be difficult, right? Like it's Red Bull. Like if at the middle of the season he's doing shit, they probably will cut him. I don't think they'll take Yuki though. I like Yuki's a known entity. He's been there for what, 5 years now, and he's like decent. But like, do you want to bring in a decent new driver who could be really good, or bring in a decent driver who's been around for 5 years? Probably is never going to be something special, right? I don't think Yuki ever gets that seat, like ever.
So here again, like I have so many conspiracy theories when it comes to Red Bull. Here's my Yuki Tsunoda conspiracy theory about
Yeah.
this. So um let's look at this from the other perspective, right? Let's imagine they promote Yuki, right? And
Mhm.
Yuki ends up being shit, right? Yuki ends up being terrible. Not even like passable, not even like an Alex Albon. Like he ends up being like worse than that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then Liam Lawson, who's only been in 3 races, has only been in like what 10 races so far in his career. Like he ends up not being that great at Red Bull. And so they're like, well, we can't cut Yuki because Liam Lawson is not doing anything, right? And obviously we
Yeah.
can't promote Isaac Hadjar after like 3 weeks, right? So they
Mm.
end up being in like in a tough spot. What I think that they decided to do, I think that they know that Yuki Tsunoda can be like he's not going to be amazing, but he's going to be a serviceable Red Bull driver. So I think that what they wanted to do was promote Lawson so that like they'll give Lawson his chance. They'll give him his 6 months, right? Or like 3, 4 months. And if he flames out, they have Yuki. Versus if they promoted Yuki and Yuki flamed out, they might not have Lawson there. So I think what's going to happen is I think Lawson's not going to perform. Um, like we kind of saw him do a similar thing with like Franco Colapinto. Like he got 4 points last year, Liam Lawson. Like that's
Yeah, you got two ninth places I'm looking at right now. Yeah.
yeah, that's not a good showing. I mean, Yuki Tsunoda
In
got
6 races, though. I mean, he was only in 6 races last season
yeah,
because he was in 5 races the season before. So
sure, that's fair, but in those 6 races, Yuki Tsunoda got 8 points.
that's
You know
true.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he's going to be that good. And I think they cut him mid-season and promote Yuki.
Yeah, it's
Um,
entirely possible. Yeah.
I also like my theory about Yuki. I mean, I don't think it's a theory. I think it's just kind of widely agreed upon now is that Yuki was forced onto them by Honda,
Yeah, totally.
and um Christian Horner doesn't like things being forced on him. So
Yeah,
he's
and
just
after
like,
this year, it won't be a Honda power unit anymore. It'll be Red Bull powertrains, right? That's why I don't think Yuki is long for this world or ever going to get promoted because there's no Honda after engine after this year, right? Like,
yeah.
why would they care to have him around?
I do have to say though, like going into this year, I was a real bear on Yuki.
Mhm.
But I actually think that he had a pretty good year. Like 12th for Red Bull 2 is actually like if you look at the people above him, right?
Yeah.
We have all of these guys, Perez, Alonso, Gasly, Hulkenberg, and Yuki Tsunoda as 12th. Is there a single person above Yuki Tsunoda that you're like, hey, he underperformed this person? Like everybody that he beat, he should have beaten, right? And he even beat some people that he shouldn't really have beaten. He shouldn't have really beaten Esteban Ocon, right? Like,
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty low on Esteban Ocon, but out of
yeah, I guess me
all the
too.
people there, yeah, I see your train of thought. I agree.
Yeah, so all to say, I think Yuki gets the seat, and I think he performs really well. Do you want to do the bottom? Oh, do you want to do the bottom 10?
I don't know. Then we're like picking from people that like
We don't
any one
know.
race can change it really
Yeah,
easily.
the that's
I mean,
true.
we could just generally talk about what we think. Like, I think the Williams drivers will be high up there in the bottom 10. Um, who else? Who else did I have high up on there? Like
I I
Vettel,
I, I wrote
Latifi, or someone
down
like that.
I wrote down some drama points
Okay.
in one of my chats. So we already went over some of those. Leclerc versus Lewis, Oscar versus Lando. Is there any ground you want to retread on that, or do you feel like we've covered it?
No, I think we've covered those. I mean, I think the big thing everyone's going to watch is the Ferrari dynamic. Is Lewis still good? Does Leclerc win? Like, I think that's going to be the big thing. You know,
Uh
everything leading into the season, all the news, and there's just like, oh my God, so many people are in Ferrari watching Lewis on the test track and Maranello, everything. Like, there's so much behind this wanting to watch that. So,
yeah, then we have I wrote down George trying to go after Max. I did think I thought that was a funny thing at the end of the season,
yeah, it
how
was.
George was like trying to like, get at Max. And I don't know if you saw those quotes, but George literally like took like a 2 month break and then he just started pulling quotes about like how much he hated Max Verstappen. And then Max was asked about it. He's just like, look, it's the off season. I don't care. I feel like George is gonna like try to chip at his heels and Max just be like, bro, like you're over there. Why are you talking to me?
Yeah. What was that all over again? What happened at the end of last season?
Yeah, so basically, the like Max had like a ticky-tack rule violation. Like it was like I think it was like speeding in like the pit lane. I think that was it, or like something along those lines. Like not something that should be consequential. And George went to the stewards room, and it was him, Max, and the stewards, and he was like fuck this dude, like fuck him really hard. And Max was just like what? Like why are you? And so he ended up getting like a 2, 3 place grid penalty because of it. And then when Max like past George, he like flipped him off. And then which I love as an F1 thing, the flip off pass. And then like they started to have all these like different quotes in the media. George had his like crying quote, was just like, this guy, this guy's a bully. And then Max just basically said that he's two-faced. And that was kind of it. I've always liked George, but like the way that he went after Max just makes me hate him. But I think I'm just too much of a Max stan.
I mean, I think anybody who runs to the race stewards, like, and there's been a bunch of this stuff in history, like to get them to do something against another driver, it's like, dude, just drive. Like
Yeah.
do the thing you're supposed to do and do better at it if you want to win, right? It's like Proust with Senna, like Proust running to the thing and getting Senna disqualified for driving through the lane the wrong way, right? Like
By the
anytime
way,
it happens where it's like,
after driving off track, like the
yeah,
reason why
yeah, yeah,
Senna did that was because Prost drove him off track.
yeah.
Sorry, uh,
No, no, it's true. Yeah.
sorry to interrupt,
But
but
like
but continue. Yeah,
Like when you say that, it brings up thoughts of that when it's like,
yeah,
why are like you're playing this politically, like when you should be focused on winning.
yeah.
Like win on the track, don't win by like running to the stewards. Like that's always gonna look negative.
This is my big problem with Mercedes is that Mercedes carry themselves as the we prove it on track people, but like they spend so much time crying to the stewards. I mean, obviously the most famous
Oh,
one
they've
is
been crying to the stewards about Red Bull for the last decade. Maybe not
yeah,
last,
exactly.
like the last like 4 or 5 years. Like,
No, Michael, no, this is so unfair. I promised myself I wouldn't go into it, but again, like that is the ultimate crying to the stewards. Yeah, I mean, I just like I don't think Mercedes is gonna be relevant enough this year for it to be a thing.
no, I
Like
think
like
I think that's a big thing. Like people like, oh, is Mercedes going to be good with like Kimi Antonelli and these things? Now, like if Mercedes was going to be good, they would have had a good car to keep Lewis. Like, and
yeah.
they couldn't do it. They could not absolutely. They did not do it. And so, like, I have no confidence that like the car is going to be any significantly better this year. Like, why would it be? Like, what are they going to do differently this year and the last year? This chassis, like, I don't know.
Yeah. I do find it funny that Lewis literally had a whole episode of the last season of Drive to Survive where he was talking about how he wanted to like leap to Ferrari. And then like, the big ending was that Toto convinced him to stay. And then like literally the next year he just
Yeah,
signed
yeah.
for Ferrari
Before the next season even starts,
before the
like.
next season even starts. Yeah, I mean, one thing that like I'm getting ready to be upset by is that um with Drive to Survive, like there's gonna be so much stuff there this season. Yet for
Yeah.
some reason, I bet you they're still gonna have two episodes about Alpine. Like they always have two episodes about Alpine, and I'm already getting pretty angry about it. But here's my theory why. Because in season one was literally the Red Bull Renault show. That was literally the entire thing. And Haas. And I think the producers just feel a sense of loyalty to those teams for being the reason why they were able to
Well,
get
it was
there.
about access early on. What teams gave them access that first season, right?
Yeah. And it was literally just Red Bull, Renault, and Haas.
Yeah.
I think like Williams also, but who cares about Williams? I
Mercedes
think
wouldn't give them the time of day. Ferrari wouldn't give them anything back then. Yeah.
and that's why in season four, it was a pretty slanted telling of the story. Even as a Red Bull fan, it was a pretty slanted telling of the 2021. Again, I agree with the telling, but it was a very slanted telling. They 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 go to the mat for their guys, which you have to respect. I am excited for the Esteban Pierre Gasly episode where we're going to see like those two on the podium in Sao Paulo. I don't know if you saw the press conference after, but like Esteban Ocon was just like, yeah, when I saw Max behind me, I was just like, you know what, just go ahead. You can get first place. I'm not going to fight you.
Surprising coming from Ocon, but
That's true. He does go
that
for
guy
every
wants to fight
gap.
over anything.
The last question, the last big question I feel is like, so do we think that we're going to see an Alonso revival? Because the past 2 years have kind of looked a lot like his last year at McLaren, where he wasn't really doing anything. Like, do you think that we're going to see like the old Alonso back for like one season?
I mean, to me, it's all been dictated by the car, right? When the car was good at the beginning of not last season, but the season before, I think, was it
Yeah.
2023? I think the beginning they were good. Alonso was up there. He was on the podium, right? So unless you think he's gotten worse over the past 2 years, so from 42 to 44 or whatever age he's at now, um, I think if they give him a good car, he could still be right back up there. Like I don't think he's in the world I think Lewis is in right now, where he is getting not quite as good over time. I haven't seen anything from Alonso to suggest like, in the past 2 years he's gotten worse. So I think it's gonna be dictated by the car. He's constantly beating Lance, like always. So
Yeah.
and if you
Yeah,
think
man,
Lance is decent, then yeah.
I think that I actually do think the Lance is decent. I saw a stat. I forgot what it was. I think it was like um the only driver who didn't drive for Red Bull, Mercedes, or Ferrari who got a podium between like 2019 and 2021 was Lance, which is actually like kind of a crazy statistic if you think
Yeah, well,
about
that's when they
it.
had the Racing Point car that was basically the previous year Mercedes. But yes, yes, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah, fair, fair point. But yeah, I mean, I think that Alonso gets a fresh wind. I think that Adrian Newey really like turns that car up. And I actually think that Aston Martin becomes a real contender in 2026. Like I think that then they might actually be one of the favorites in 2026. Just because Adrian Newey has his like, God level autism where he can just see air. And so he doesn't need a wind tunnel. He
Yeah.
just sees the air. So yeah. Who do you think is who do you think is be the big people who lose their seat next year?
Oh, who's gonna lose their seat after this season?
Or either who do you think is the big person to lose their seat, or what do you think are the big silly season moves that are happening?
Hmm. I mean, I think like Esteban Ocon's gonna leave at some point. Like if anything happened this year again, like against a teammate or something, I feel like he would just be out. Um, the thing is, so many people left last year, and there's like so many young drivers now. So I'm like, who's left around that's like old, that's like guaranteed to leave? Like not that many, because like Lewis is around and like Alonso's around.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm sure some of these like new drivers don't pan out. Like I don't know a ton about, right? Like Kimi Antonelli, he'll be around even if he doesn't perform this year, but like I don't know a ton about like Bortoleto and some of these other drivers. Like I bet you at least one of them fizzles out and is gone after like 1 year.
Yeah, well, let me throw some names at you and to just hear what you think. The third one you might get upset at me for, but I'm gonna throw it out anyway. The first name is Alexander Albon.
I like Albon, but yeah.
So let's look at his performance the past couple of years.
I mean,
Uh
he's been better than everybody else who's been his teammate the past few years, right? So if you
yes,
want to
but
make a case for Albon leaving, you have to think Carlos does so much better than him in that Williams.
I mean, is that really like so out of the question?
I don't think it's
So
necessarily like completely out of the question. Like it could happen, but like I don't think Albon, well,
when did Albon go to Williams? Do you remember? Was it 23?
no, he's been there for like 3 years, I think.
Let me get this right. Um,
Um, like you can make the case that like Albon has had like really bad teammates and that's why he's looked so good, right? Like I think that's a pretty easy argument to make. Um,
2022. Yeah,
so
so
like,
2022
Latifi was terrible.
he
What?
had 4 points in 2022.
Yeah,
Who was his teammate in 2022?
Latifi.
Latifi. Okay, Latifi had 2 points, so that's not really lighting him up. 2023
Yeah.
he
Lawson,
had
or not Lawson, sorry, Sargent.
yeah. So Sargent, I think he just looked good because of Sargent. He got to 27 points.
Yeah.
I mean he had two good showings, Canada and Italy number two.
Yeah.
Um,
And you can make the case that Sargent and Latifi weren't good drivers. Like definitely Sargent, I think that's the case. But
And Colapinto really fizzed out. Like he got
he just
4
got a
points and
flash in the
then
pan. Yeah.
yeah. So Albon 12 points. I think Alexander Albon might be one of the first people to go. I think that maybe Colapinto comes back and they're like, at least let's ride with this guy. I
Yeah.
mean, I you know, I do think that Carlos Sainz, like, I think Carlos Sainz finishes next year probably 11th or 12th. Like I think he
Yeah.
does really well. Hopefully this doesn't contradict my world constructors. No, that's kind of in line with that. Yeah, I think Carlos Sainz is very well, and I mean we saw this. I think one of the best examples of this, granted, is a much younger driver, but was Mick Schumacher. Like when
Yeah.
Mick Schumacher was with the
Haas.
Russian guy,
Oh,
he looked like a
Mazepin.
stud. He looked like a
Yeah.
stud next to Mazepan.
Yeah.
And then when literally they brought in I can't believe it. So for people who don't know, I'm in Brazil right now. It's 1 a.m. right now, so that's why I'm blanking out his names. When he was with Kevin Magnussen, he literally just fell apart. I think that's what happens with Alexander Albon. So that's the first name I want to throw at you. The second name is Fernando Alonso.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that's more a decision he makes, right? Like it seems like people have been willing to have him for a long time. And if he's performing better than like, a teammate, what reason does he have to leave? Like I feel like it's up to him.
Oh no,
Unless
I think it's an Aston decision. So Aston the past like what 5 years have had an old champion next to Lance, right?
yeah.
That's kind of been the formula, but that's when they weren't really competing that much. Now they're competing, and like if Alonso doesn't do that well, I think that you know Stroll just goes out on the market. It's just like, hey, who can I buy? And just be like, I don't know, maybe like, do you think George Russell might be a better buy than Alonso? Do you think that Carlos Sainz might be better buy than Alonso? I know he has like a 5 year contract, but contracts are contracts. Who cares about them, right? Um, and then I'm going to throw a third name at you, which could change this whole dynamic, change the whole way you think about this question.
Yeah.
Lando Norris.
I want to hear why you think that's possible.
I think that the
As a
Oscar versus
mental
Lando.
breakdown.
No, I mean, not even him breaking down. I think this is actually like kind of an opposite argument where I think that he goes to the team. So I think that Lando and Oscar are kind of like what they remind me of. I think I made a video about this like last year. Was they remind me of Ricardo Verstappen of 2018. And I
Yeah.
think that I think that Lando's getting to that Ricardo phase where he's just like, these people are obviously preferring Oscar over me. And I think that, that's getting kind of clear that they're doing that. And, you know, could Lando give them an ultimatum? And could the team just be like, yeah, sorry, we're preferring Oscar on this one. And at that point, if Lando's looking in the market, as much as I don't like Lando, like if I'm Stroll and I have a chance to get a 26-year-old Lando versus, an 82-year-old Alonso, I'm picking Lando, every single
I mean,
day of
I
the
think in
week.
that case scenario, yeah, I could see it. But don't you think Zach Brown's like super gay for Lando? Like it seemed like that for a long time.
Yeah, man. I mean, true, but like, is there a ring on that finger? Do they have a kid? Because if not, if Ana Daramas is walking by,
I mean,
like,
I think it comes down to how they perform, right? Like Daniel Ricciardo was their only race win for several years, and they got rid of him because he was doing a lot worse, right? So like,
yeah.
could they get rid of Lando if like Oscar was just outperforming him by a lot? Sure, but I don't think that's gonna happen. Like, I feel like they're gonna be close, if anything.
Oh, I'm not saying I don't think they get rid of him. I think there's gonna be so much tension on the team. I think
Yeah,
it's gonna be like a Prost Senna type scenario, but like with two people who aren't actually champions. Like I think it's just
yeah,
gonna be such a toxic situation, or an Alonso Lewis type situation, right? Where just like one of those people is just like, hey, I have to get out of here. This is just so terrible. And I think that it's gonna be Lando, and I think that this is my hot take prediction for the year. I think Lando either goes to Red Bull or he goes to Aston Martin. Now, the case for Red Bull, I actually think weirdly enough, there's a good case for Red Bull, which is
right.
that once, like after Sao Paulo, Lando and Max got along really well. Like they went back to being really good friends. And I think that the fundamental thing about Lando is I don't think he wants like, to use a Gen Z term. I don't think he wants to smoke. Like I think he just wants to enjoy himself. And so I think that if, Red Bull have been looking at him for 4 years now. I think if Helmut Marko comes to him and says, look, man, you don't want to be a champion. You've made it very clear that you are not interested in being a champion. And that's fine. You can be the second fiddle to Max. You two are good friends. You don't have to fight. And we think you're a good driver, so you can have this seat for the rest of your life. Like,
Yeah.
why doesn't he take that?
Yeah. But what's interesting there is like everyone's talked about how Max doesn't want to stay at Red Bull in the future.
That's
So then
true.
we have this world where like Lando comes in after a season, Max leaves, and then Lando's the number one driver there.
So that's actually the last big question that we have because my girlfriend has already come in 3 times glaring at me to go to sleep. But the last big question we have is I think Max's contract is up this year. Um, does he stay or does he go? Here, I'm just gonna check.
Trying to see about his contract. Yeah.
No, he's under contract until 2028. So this
Yeah.
year's 2025. So he has 3 more years. But I mean, he can always like leave the contract. I mean, Christian Horner said at the beginning of the season that if Max wants to leave, he can, right? So,
I mean, we just know what we heard during last season of like the Verstappens being kind of in the opposite camp of Horner when all, the Dick Pick saga was going on and, you know,
well, I
the,
I,
the,
I
the civil
mean,
war within the team, all that stuff.
well, I mean, did you hear the conspiracy theory? I mean, you might not have just because I like live on like Red Bull conspiracy theories that it was just Verstappen who leaked it.
I mean, it's entirely possible, but like, I have no clue.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think like I think that it was honestly like a champagne problem. I think that the team was doing so well. You see this happen, in companies that are doing well. You see this happening in sports teams that are doing well. You see this happening in empires that do well. We're like, I mean, not to make this too general of a point, but we see this right now in America, right?
Yeah.
We're like, America's way too powerful. So people think that their biggest enemies are other Americans, not like China. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like 1970, everyone knew the biggest enemy was the USSR, right? But right now we've been winning for so long that we're now fighting with each other, right? I think that's kind of what happened with Red Bull. And I think that Adrian Newey leaving might actually be the best thing that's ever happened to Red Bull, weirdly enough, because I think the rest of the team might be good enough to like get that car into a contention, thing. And I think that Horner and Josh Verstappen get back on the same page and are like, okay, like we're here to win Max's fifth championship. Because if he wins that fifth championship, he is now clearly in the second tier all time, right?
Yes.
He go from tier 3 to tier 2. So, and tier 2 right now is just him and like Fangio. So,
Yeah. It's just been, yeah, just below Schumacher and Hamilton. Yeah.
well, so here's an interesting question, I guess, because I really want my fiance to call her for a wedding. I keep on asking interesting questions, but so the common thing with drivers, right, is that like you have to win a championship at 2 teams to really be considered a top tier driver of all time because is it yours? Is it the car is always the question. Fangio won 5 championships in 4 cars, which I think is just insane. But back then the car didn't mean as much. My question is, Max has won the championship twice in a car that wasn't the number one constructors. Do you think that's
Yeah.
sufficient to like overcome that? It's just it wasn't you, it was the car. He's like, what are you talking about? This car sucked. 2 years.
Yeah, I think it overcomes at least some of it, if not all of it. Like, that's something that not many drivers can point to. Like, it's usually fighting their teammate. He's like, no, literally, like, he was fighting the car and still won. So,
Yeah,
I agree. I think it can definitely help that argument.
that that car was terrible last year. I literally so I made it a point for the past few years of Formula One to never complain about the stewards because I just hated the extent to which the Mercedes fans did after
Yeah.
2021. Um, and I literally after the Sao Paulo qualifying broke down. I was just complaining about the stewards left and right, and then he just Fuck, that was such a great race. That was better than sex, watching that
I
race.
just saw when I was searching around. There's reports, it's not confirmed, that Aston Martin made a $1 billion offer for Max Verstappen.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which by the way, like if like that is the biggest argument for Max Verstappen um uh staying at Red Bull is that if he got $1 billion to reunite with Adrian Newey and he said no, like what's the other offer that's gonna beat that? You know what I
No,
mean?
there's no other offer. Yeah.
Plus
Like if it's
he
the Ferrari and like you really care about racing at Ferrari, which I don't think he does, but
yeah, I don't think he really cares about that. Like um I mean, Toto still thinks that he can get Max, which, seemed feasible for like 3 or 4 weeks last year. Like there was a 3, 4 week period where Mercedes were doing well. That was like the George and Lewis disc wall race, where it seemed possible, but now it just seems like a pipe dream again.
yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they get him.
Um, cool. So uh do we have any other big topics top of mind for you?
I mean, we could talk for hours, but I don't want you to get divorced before you get married over there. So, I mean,
Yeah,
the other thing I would say is like, what do you think about Australia being the first race again? I'm pretty happy about it. I like it, but
So I mean, for personal reasons, I really hate this calendar. The
okay.
reason is because I'm traveling around the world and I want to go to a race, and literally not a single race lines up with where I am. I might be in Thailand during the Singapore Grand Prix, and like
Okay.
Thailand and Singapore are right next to each other. Like I could actually, it might actually be cheaper to like fly from Thailand to Singapore to watch the race and then just fly back that same day instead of getting a hotel.
Yeah.
But Singapore is also the most expensive Grand Prix, so like,
And you've
but
even said going to a Grand Prix is like the worst way to watch a race. So,
it's terrible. Grand Prix are horrible, but like
I've never gone.
I also like, want to do it again. I don't know why, but yeah, it's absolutely terrible experience. If you ever go to a Grand Prix, I recommend Japan.
Yeah.
Like Japan is the one that I went to and it was terrible, but like being there, I was just like, this is the least amount of terribleness. Like the fact that it was in Japan mitigated the terribleness because there was great food, it was very cheap, it was very well organized and
It's one of the
everything.
best tracks in my opinion. Like
Yeah,
the
great,
80
great track.
corners if you really like it. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So, how about you? Did you like them starting with Australia?
I do just because it reminds me of the way things were before. And
Yeah.
like, okay, it's like the winter, spring when they're starting, but it's the summer in Australia. Like, it just lines up with like what I'm used to from like racing in decades past. So I
Yeah.
like it for that. But that's me just being like kind of whimsical, right? Like, there's nothing beyond that.
I think it's kind of funny how I heard that they're doing this to like save on like emissions and stuff. Like they're starting
Oh,
in
because they're going to go to
Asia.
China and Japan. They're going to do all the ones in that area there or whatever.
Yeah, then
Like,
they're going to do Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and then Miami,
they're really
Italy.
saving on emissions when they have car crashes and they have to like overnight ship full chassis from Europe there. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I saw a thing that like Taylor Swift's private jet i- travel in a year is equal to half the emissions of Los Angeles.
Like,
So yeah,
they can say they're doing it for that reason, whatever.
yeah. All right.
But I
So
mean, that's making Japan way earlier in the season too, and some other ones.
my girlfriend is glaring at me, so I'm gonna stop recording. But it was a good preview. We should do regular check-ins.
Yeah,
Based
let's
on
do
like what
it.
our schedule looks like. Here, I'm gonna
Yeah.
stop recording right now.